Oh, everybody's cheering right now, by the way.
It's getting ready to go. They're going to let me know when it's. Okay,
Great.
we are live. This is so exciting.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing very well. I've been looking forward to this all week. Thank you so much for making some time.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. Thank you. I'm very excited for our conversation today. I've prepared my materials.
That's right, because folks who are tuning in, it will give some folks some time to log on, but Phillipa and I have prepared an American history game that we're going to play, and we're going to quiz each other on some little known facts from the past. But before we get there, it's really an honor to be able to spend some time with you. I hope that you and your family and your loved ones are healthy and everyone's doing all right.
We are. Thank you for asking. Yes, we've been quarantining and taking all of the measures that we should be to keep ourselves and other people safe. So we're lucky. We feel lucky. And how about you?
I'm
How
glad.
are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're doing well. I mean, it's a very strange situation, and it's kind of strange in my household because my wife Alicia is a doctor. She's an OBGYN doc at Grady Hospital here in Atlanta. So life for her is more intense, but not so different in that she's still going into work every day while so many people are at home. And her experience at work has been obviously profoundly changed. A lot of medical services, aren't functioning now, but babies keep coming.
Yeah, that's right. And how is she doing mentally, emotionally? Does she feel like she can't believe it? Does she feel like she's ready and prepared? I mean, I'm sure it's like a mixed bag of all sorts of things.
She's a soldier. I think a lot of them are just soldiering through. The hours are really long. And I think initially, particularly when there was a lot of rationing of the equipment and the procedures for how to handle, people coming in with fevers, women who are coming in delivering babies with fevers, all of that was, I think, all the hospitals were having to adapt quickly. But we have such great public health professionals here in Georgia, and it seems like they've really risen to the occasion. And I know that she's proud of the work she's doing, keeping people healthy even in these extraordinary times. So I'm very proud of her and proud of the work she's doing.
Do you guys get to see each other at all? I'm sure you're very busy as well. How's your campaign going?
The campaign is going well, all things considered. I mean, it's a very strange time to be running for office because so much of campaigning is, direct contact with people. I mean, that's really where you build connections with volunteers and supporters and voters, and trying to find, I mean, what we're doing right now, you and I, trying to find a way to connect with the public and with fans, with supporters, and also just give people something positive when the news and politics is so negative. I mean, we've been adapting. We got a lot of volunteers who are texting voters from home. Obviously, we can't go door to door. We'd love to be doing that. But I also think that, people, one of the things that we're doing is when we reach out to voters, we're just checking how people are doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of voters who are older don't necessarily have a support network. There's a lot of seniors who are pretty isolated at home. So we're just making sure that they've got what they need and trying to help connect them with resources.
And what do you think is the best way to keep people safe when they go to the polls? What do you think? I mean, what are you advising people to do? How are you advising people to strategize about that?
So we're advising people to vote by mail. And the state of Georgia, there've been some hiccups, but the state of Georgia has sent all active registered voters an absentee ballot application. And that's the safest way for folks to vote. And we've got instructions on the website, which my team will post down below in the comments to get all those details. But there will be in-person voting early and on election day. And, what we hope and urge the state to do is to adhere to CDC guidelines so that people can vote safely and so that the people who are working the polls can stay safe. Because there's obviously a lot of, touching screens and paperwork and being in confined spaces. So the state of Georgia is really going to need to step up and do this in a safe way.
Wow.
But Phillipa, I have to break away from politics and COVID-19 for a second, because everyone is getting their fill of that all day long. And I was really excited that we were going to get together this week, especially because there are two pieces of huge news in your career. And I saw that you and Lin-Manuel were both posting about some big developments with the Hamilton family. For Hamilton fans, I think a lot of folks tuned in are, let's be honest, people are here to see you, not to see me. So what's going on with Hamilton?
Well, it was announced this week that on July 3rd, Hamilton will be available for streaming on Disney Plus, which is so exciting. A little bit surprising because I think we all thought it would happen a little bit later in 2021, but I think it's perfect timing considering the circumstances. You know, I think Broadway will probably be the last place to come back once we're sort of getting our sea legs and trying to figure out what life past COVID is.
Yeah.
So I think this is a great thing to make accessible to people, you know, so that we can remember like the art of congregation and what it means to gather in a space and to have an experience together collectively. And even like on something like this, like I know I'm talking to you, but I am aware that there are people listening, and in a weird way, I can sort of like feel that. Like I was a little nervous because I felt like I was going to be going on stage or something. But you know, that's why I think things like this are important. But it's so important to remember that like what we can get in person as opposed to a screen is like a totally different experience. So that being said, Hamilton with the original Broadway cast coming to your living room is super exciting, especially for my nieces and nephews who've never seen the show and will now get to see me in it.
I never thought about that. So you've got young members of your family who never got to experience it with you in the cast.
Yes, totally. Or they were like, you know, babies.
Right.
And now they're children, so they'll get it a little bit better. So that's exciting. That's sort of like the big news of my life right now.
That is super exciting. So that was filmed obviously during the first run on Broadway, right?
Yeah, it was later in our run, before the Tonys, I think, or maybe right after the Tonys. And we took a couple of performances where we set up some cameras and shot the show live. And then we had a day where we were doing some insert shots, some Steadicam shots, some crane shots. So not only are you going to get to see the show from an audience perspective, but I think you'll get a little bit deeper inside of it than you could have seen it live. So fingers crossed. I've never seen it, so I'm super excited.
So were you playing to an empty hall, or were there just cameras there when you were doing a regular show?
So the two times there were two performances, like live performances with audience, that we did set up cameras with, and then there was the day where we sort of like we were on stage but nobody was out in the house, and we were sort of getting in and trying to get different shots. You know, I mean, the possibilities were endless because it's just like a feast of choreography and images and lights, and you know, I'm sure Tommy Kail, you know, really just like went with it, and it's going to be beautiful. I know that much.
And that'll be Disney Plus starting when?
July 3rd.
July 3rd.
Right in time for Independence Day. Yeah.
I feel like I've got you on a sort of late night show here. We're promoting the new release. So what is it like? I mean, I guess one thing I was thinking about when getting ready to talk to you is obviously singing is a huge part of your life. And right now, I mean, there's no way to sing with people, right? Like the experience of harmony. It's
hard, especially on platforms like this, because it's delayed. So if you're trying to harmonize with someone, you know, far away from you, from a phone, it can't work. But there's a lot of amazing, quite frankly, like creativity and artistic endeavors happening where you can take like, you know, screens from Zoom and you can like reconfigure them and put people together and have them harmonizing and singing, and then put a track to the back of it. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff happening, which for me is fun to see, but in making it, I'm totally like not techno savvy in that way. So I'm just like amazed that I can even like pick up my phone and be like record, like, and then edit it. Like, that's incredible to me.
Yeah, but just like, and so you can still give the audience something, but just for you, I mean, I would imagine you would miss just the experience of singing in a space with people and making harmony in person. It's like so many people around the world who love singing just can't sing right now.
That's true. But I am also really lucky that my husband is also an actor and a singer, and a very good
there
one.
You go.
So we recently made a video for the Steppenwolf Theater Gala, and we harmonized on a little a cappella duet that we had there. So, like, you know, we can find it. That's the beauty of this time, really, which is like, you know, I have time to come up with these like a cappella harmonies and make a mashup in my living room, you know, and it's for something, and people are going to enjoy it and watch it. Whereas before I would sort of do that for myself, but I wouldn't really think like, oh, I'm going to share this with people. So it's nice. It's good to like change it up a bit.
So are you coming on the show to announce an EP or a mixtape of your living room compositions?
I mean, yeah, let's see how long this quarantine lasts. So I'll call it the quarantine album. It's all a cappella mashups with me and
what's going to happen for Broadway? I mean, like, how long is it going to be until y'all can raise the curtain again?
We don't know. I mean, I think a lot of shows have announced that they're postponing opening up until September. As of now, that's just a date that I think is put in people's brains. But obviously, you know, being in a theater, like it's different. Like if we're going to work like on a film or TV set, because, you know, we're putting ourselves at risk in order to like go make something, but to put your audience at risk is just, you know, really, you don't want to put anybody at risk. But I think especially since our audience, you know, they're sitting out there, they're all really close to each other. We would want to make sure that everybody is super safe. And I think that means maybe waiting. That means maybe like, you know, even if things are coming back, that we would wait even more. I mean, that's just my prediction. I don't really know, but I would imagine that people would want to be as safe as possible.
Yeah, I mean, so like so many things, just playing it by ear.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But New York has also just been hit so hard. I mean, I know y'all have been going through hell, and it's just the human toll has been such a tragedy.
It has been, and it's truly remarkable how in one moment it can sort of just feel like life is normal, like, you know, every day kind of feels like Sunday in a weird way. And then at the same time, like when we walk outside and we're really like processing like how many people are wearing masks and how many shops are closing and how many people are ill and have lost people, you know, like we're incredibly grateful, and at the same time like almost can't believe it. But I think, you know, part of the reason that we feel so I think like secure is because we feel confident in the leadership that we have locally here, and you know, we're doing everything that we can in our own little way, you know, and I'm just like crossing my fingers that we can all sort of come together and figure it out. But how are you guys doing in Georgia? Do you feel like you're able to communicate with people in this campaign and get one-on-one with people in the way that you would if you were, you know, traveling around and knocking on doors? Or how is that working for you? And what's the temperature there?
It's totally different. I mean, what we would like to be doing right now is gathering volunteers and, you know, all strategizing together on the message that we're taking out to people's doorsteps and knocking on doors. Mm-hmm. Because that's really where campaigns are won and lost. You know, you can run all the TV ads you want, you can do all of the poll tested, poll driven stuff, but it's face-to-face interactions, neighbors talking to neighbors. That's where real persuasion happens. I think people so distrust what they get on television. Mm-hmm. And there's so much negativity in politics that the only way to really break through that is, for someone you trust from your community that you can see right in front of you, to just come and have a conversation or have a cup of coffee. And to lose the ability to create human contact and community like that is, it's a blow to our campaign effort, but it's also just, it's the same thing so many people are going through in so many different fields and so many different parts of life. It's the same thing that's happening in your profession. The magic of being together is something that I think we're all working through, how to best replicate. And there's still nothing like real human contact. That being said, I do think that we're still building community around the campaign. And I think that the reason that we're able to do that is that politics is so not abstract right now, right? Like the link between life and death, human health, and leadership and government is so apparent to everybody, even people who don't pay attention to politics in normal times. That what I'm feeling from the community and from supporters is a huge welling up of determination to make change. Because, and not to get partisan in a conversation like this, I think that there's really just a broad sense that what we're getting isn't good enough, just by any standard. And that is really motivating for people, where lives are on the line. And so, we're trying to channel that. We're using technology, we're texting, calling from home. And I think it's still effective, but you just can't replicate that conversation on the doorstep. And I don't know when it will be responsible for us to go out and campaign like that.
Right. Do you feel, well, first of all, I think you're right in that people are a little fed up with the current situation. I have to say, and I've told you this before, but so people know that I've told you this, when I heard that you were running for the 6th, and this was back in 2017, I think I had sort of given up. I was like, well, there's nothing else that I can do. And I was so inspired when you sort of like popped up on my Twitter feed because people were hearing about you. I was so inspired that there was like an outlet. Like we can remember that like the fight is not over, and there's not one person who's making all these decisions, and that, if the person in the White House is not the person that I wanted there, like I've always thought to myself, like, well, who am I going to call? Like, who am I going to call to fix this? Like, this is a problem. And it's like, oh, you got to call your senators. You got to call your representatives. Like, literally, like I should have like them in my phone. You know what I mean? Like, call them and tell, like, they want to hear from you. That's the whole point of why they're running, is they want to hear what you have to say. So I just feel like,
they should.
Yes. And I thank you for running that first time, because like, it was just inspiring, even though, I don't have a skin in the game in Georgia. It was just inspiring to see from my perspective that like, we can really like focus more locally, more statewide on these things that matter to us, that it's not dead to us just because, it feels like unreachable in this place called DC, that it's accessible to us. And it starts with voting, quite frankly. That just starts with voting. It just starts with doing some research, finding out who you really like, who you're inspired by, who has the same values that you do, and like following the path that they're going down. And if they don't go down the path that's exactly yours, like you go down the one that's closest to yours, and that's how you get closer to what the world that you want to see. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. And
thank you so much. That really means a lot to me. And I think, the message, I hope that a message people take away from this conversation and spread far and wide, and especially all the young people who are tuned in and all of the Hamilton fans who have followed you through thick and thin. That show was about people taking history into their own hands.
That's
And
right.
that show was, I mean, what the famous line from the show is how lucky we are to be alive right now, right? And
Yes,
it's a
one of them,
strange
one
thing
of the
to
many famous
say,
lines.
one of many famous lines, yeah. It's a strange thing to say at a moment of crisis and tragedy, but when history is unfolding, if we have the privilege and the obligation of shaping it, then that's on us, and it's not something that faces on TV are going to do for us. It's something we have to do for ourselves, and the bare minimum, the bottom line is voting.
Hmm. That's right. That's right. I have some voting related history facts in
Okay.
my what did we call the game? Did we call the game something? Did we have like a
I think we
title for
called
the
it
game?
the Phillipa and Jon share facts from American history with each other game.
Really long title. It's
Yeah,
great.
that's the working title.
How should we start this game? Do we want to play the game?
Let's do it. You're up first.
Okay.
I'm ready.
I'm up first. Okay. All right. So we've been talking about Eliza, and so there's like a couple of like little mini facts about Eliza that I think some you might know, some you might not. So Eliza was the only one of her sisters that had a marriage she was given a blessing from her parents to marry Alexander Hamilton. All of her other sisters eloped. And I just thought that was really fun because I feel like, what Renee and Jasmine and I found together, I can't help but think like they were not as far from us as we think, like they may be in history books and in paintings and in statues, but like they're very close to who we are. So anyway, that fact just reminded me of that. But Eliza, we know that she was the wife of Alexander Hamilton, that she established the first private orphanage in New York City, which I don't know if you know this, John, today exists still. It's called Graham Wyndham. They still serve youth and their families. It's basically her living legacy, as they call it.
Yeah.
And Eliza also raised funds for the Washington Monument, which in my mind, I was like, oh, that's a big deal. And then like when I really thought about it, when I first sang that line, I was like, wait a minute, she lived a really long time. So Eliza lived to be 97 years old.
97?
97. So she survived Hamilton 50 years.
So
okay.
So she almost saw the Civil War.
Yes. So Eliza was super tight with Sally Madison, and they both attended the laying of the Washington Monument cornerstone on July 4th, 1848, right? Because they had both known the first president. And attending this laying of the cornerstone was also the current president, President James Polk, and a bunch of other representatives, et cetera, people in Washington, and Abraham Lincoln. So like, in my mind, I just like to imagine Eliza standing next to Abraham Lincoln, looking out onto the Washington Monument being like the cornerstone being laid for the first time. Like that's just, when I imagine that in my mind, like maybe they weren't standing next to each other, but when I imagine that in my mind, I'm like, that is so cool how history works like that, that we think, like that we're not so far from these people as we think. Because Abraham Lincoln, we're like, oh yeah, we know that dude. He wasn't too far from us. And then we're like, oh wait, no, he knew Eliza Hamilton. So, crazy, right?
That you said 1849?
1848.
1848. So if she lived to be 97, then someone who was born in the late 1840s, who lived to be 97, would themselves have lived through the Civil War, both world wars, and passed in the 40s during the Roosevelt or Truman years. I mean, it's not that long ago.
Not that long. Like I forget how young our country is. You can take a year-long course, right, on history of American history, but it's very young. Anyway, so that's my first fact.
Well, and before I get to my first fact in Phillipa and Jon share facts from American history game, I think that one of the most powerful things about the musical is that it really gives people a sense of being in the moment, right? I mean, there's something about the fact that it's a live show and that it's been translated so brilliantly into language and poetry that's contemporary, that it's like time travel. And like, to your point, it's not really that long ago, where, in the grand scheme, these are like our contemporaries.
Exactly. Yeah. We could like have lunch with them tomorrow, basically.
If we can, we should. Okay, so it's my turn.
Yeah.
And what I want to share with you first is a story from Birmingham, Alabama, May 1963. And this is the Birmingham Children's Crusade. So we are in the heat of the civil rights movement brewing in the South. And Alabama is one of the hottest places for resistance to Jim Crow and segregation and racism. And there was this controversy among church leaders and civil rights leaders about whether children should be allowed to participate in civil disobedience. And they had this really intense debate, which you can imagine, it's not an easy answer. It's not a clear thing, because these people were getting hit by billy clubs and assaulted by dogs and arrested and sprayed with fire hoses and getting killed. But they made the decision to let some of the children who were determined to be a part of the struggle to themselves participate. And thousands of school children, ages from 6 to 18, in Kelly Ingram Park in Birmingham by the 16th Baptist Church, assembled and began protesting and began singing and began chanting. And Bull Connor set dogs on them, beat them, arrested them. There were little children sitting in jail. But it so shocked the conscience of the rest of the country, and it shook the community, that it was that same month, May of 1963, that all public facilities in Birmingham were desegregated, because little children as young as 6 years old, all the way to seniors in high school, got involved in that struggle. And I was just really shook by that. And I was thinking to myself, about one of the controversial positions that I've taken in my political life is that the voting age should be reduced to 16 years old. I think that when it comes to environmental issues, civil rights issues, criminal justice issues, first of all, young people have skin in the game and are wise enough to participate and should be able to help define our future. And I was just so moved by this story from our past about children, and it was their push that desegregated that city.
That's a very moving story. And what a testament to the fact that so often I think young people are overlooked and made to feel like, they're not the ones who should be making decisions because their parents make decisions, or they're not ready to make decisions. But so often, I have spoken to my nieces and nephews, I've spoken to young people who are Hamilton fans. They know so much more just because they have such a pure ability to just see straight through like what is like true and authentic and what is not, because their only agenda is to just be alive and absorb the world around them. So I think you're right. I think like young people are so powerful, and if the voting age change to 16. I mean, I would be so much more excited as a high school student to like understand, as I'm learning about American history, I would be so much more excited about it because I'd be like, and look, I'm participating in it actively, like right now, as opposed to once I leave high school, you know, then
Right.
I'll apply all the things that I'm learning. But these are the things like you're learning how to apply, you're learning how to learn, and you're learning how to apply those things as you're learning them. So gosh, I could not be more excited about that.
Okay, you're up.
Okay. So this is like a big one. I have been developing this really cool show, doing readings and whatnot of a really cool new musical about the suffrage movement. And it's written by this incredible woman named Shana Taub. And I've been working with this wonderful director, Lee Silverman. And just a side note, we're actually going to perform a song from this show for the Public Theater's gala. So the Public Theater is where we did Hamilton. They do a lot of amazing work in New York City, and they also do free Shakespeare in the park. I don't know if you know this, John, but every summer,
okay. I've
which
heard
unfortunately
of it.
this summer we
Yeah,
this summer we can't do.
Oh, bummer.
But there's always free Shakespeare outside in the park, and so that has been canceled this year along with their gala. But we will be performing a song in the Zoom world of a song from Shana's show, which is so beautiful, and I hope people can tune in. You can just go to the Public Theater's website to tune into it. But so back to my first fact, which is Eliza, Abraham Lincoln, Washington Monument. So you can just like put this in your mind that the cornerstone was laid on July 4th, 1848. And July 19th, like 15 days later, was Seneca Falls, which is essentially, for those of you who are out there watching, Seneca Falls is often referenced as the beginning of the women's suffrage movement. So that's just like also blowing my mind, like thinking like all of these things were happening around the same time. The 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, which was 100 years ago. Also, the Spanish flu was happening during that time, in 1918 to 1920. So I'm like also imagining like during this time when women are trying to get the right to vote, and also like the Spanish flu, and they're wearing masks, and they're kind of going through a very similar thing. So I was inspired by that alone, just because I was like, oh, the work doesn't, you know, we can still keep going. You know, this doesn't have to stop us. So the suffrage movement is so fascinating to me because, like many pivotal movements in history, it is two things at once. It's this shining moment of glory for progress, for change, for young radical people coming to the forefront and taking matters into their own hands. But at the same time, it's also extremely imperfect. You know, the idea that progress is not a straight line, that it takes a lot of work, it's a lot of backwards and forwards. So one of the sort of imperfections of the suffrage movement was this disparity between the generations. There were those who were sort of the old guard. They were more conservative. They were sort of, you know, people who were brought up under Susan B. Anthony. They were trying to do things a little bit more, what's the word, like realistically and conservatively. And then you had like these young radicals, young women like Alice Paul. She was a leader in the suffrage movement. She formed the National Woman's Party. In fact, she was with the National American Women's Suffrage Association, which was run by Carrie Catt, who was sort of like, I guess, somewhat of a protege of Susan B. Anthony. And they clashed heads because Carrie Catt was like, whoa, slow down. And Alice Paul was like, we gotta go. We gotta get this amendment passed. So she formed the NWP and was really spearheading all of this movement. And she actually saw what was happening in England, and they were much more violent, much more militant. You know, they were young and they were hungry and they were super fed up. So that's one issue within the suffrage movement. And then another imperfection that it had was that there was a lot of racial prejudice during the suffrage movement. The abolitionist movement was happening alongside the suffrage movement. They both relied on the support of each other, but still there were a lot of moments of friction. So, for example, shining moment of glory, 1913, Alice Paul spearheads to plan a women's procession in DC, like the original Women's March, the day before President-elect Woodrow Wilson's inauguration, okay? So they're like planning this huge spectacle. There's gonna be a woman on a horse, her name is Inez Milholland. She's riding on a white horse and she's like the top of the parade, and she is leading thousands of women down the streets of Washington. So before the parade even started, and here's where the sort of like imperfection comes into play. Before the parade even started, there was a controversy that some members, they warned Alice that Southerners of the women's movement might not march with Black suffragists. And though the National American Women's Suffrage Association, they said, we're ordering, you know, Black women should be permitted to march, even though they said that many women on the day of the parade, they apparently requested that their fellow Black suffragists march in back. So cut to the day of the parade, thousands of women are attending, and a woman named Ida B. Wells, who is an activist, an editor, a journalist, she's leading the anti-lynching movement. She is protesting the orders to march in back. So she is pretending to comply with this request. And instead, when her state delegation passes, her Illinois state delegation passes, she emerges from the crowd and she joins them in the procession and is like, basically just like, I'm not gonna march in back. Thank you very much.
Wow.
And it just, yeah. And you know, things that day ended up being very successful, but they also got super violent. There were hecklers, there were rowdy spectators. The day did turn out to be a media success though, which drew a lot of attention. But it's Ida as a Black woman stepping forward to march with her state delegation instead of marching in back. That image to me is just like so amazing and powerful. And as I was doing all of this research, Hillary Clinton actually posted about Ida B. Wells, like literally like in the same moment that I was doing all this. And she said that Wells was awarded a posthumous Pulitzer Prize last week. And I'm sure this will hit very close to home, but 3 days later, 2 white men in Georgia were arrested for chasing down and murdering a Black man who had gone out for a jog. His name was Ahmaud Arbery. And she quotes Ida B. Wells, and she says, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them." In Wells's lifetime, she fought against white supremacy and for freedom of press. Her legacy is carried on by journalists and advocates who are holding the powerful accountable just as she did. The work continues. People like Ida, like Eliza, you know, their stories inspire us, and the way that we honor their legacy is by continuing the work. So I just thought I would share that, and that's pretty much my second fact. It's like a huge fact, but yeah.
That is super powerful. That that suffragettes march, that first women's march, was segregated, but Ida B. Wells, at an event where they were engaged in civil disobedience within that effort.
Right. And, you know, like it is on one hand like, oh gosh, like they weren't perfect, but we're not perfect either. Like that doesn't mean that progress can't happen. You know, it's about marching forward. It's about pushing through. It's about coming together and working through these things that are hard. I just think like that sort of moment in history really inspires me because of that. And one last like really small thing is when the 19th Amendment passed, after all of that, many years of protesting, of picketing, of arrest, of being jailed, of unsanitary conditions, of being force fed, you know, horrible, horrible things that have happened to these women. There's no photograph of the 19th Amendment being signed into law.
No photograph.
There's no photograph. Nope. Nope. I just find that really interesting.
I don't want you to spoil too much about the play that you're developing, but when you portray, you know, as an artist and as a producer, when you portray these characters in a way that's accessible to a mass audience and that informs people at scale in a way a textbook, let's be honest, never can. In a way, they are living on through that art. And that's why I love what you and your team and the people around you are doing, blending entertainment and art and history in a way that helps us understand where we've come from, because we can't possibly understand where we're going unless we understand where we come from, and also gives these epic, towering figures in history a voice that echoes on centuries after they're gone. Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful thing, and thank you for doing that.
Oh my gosh, it's honestly like, it's there's a really great quote that I'm totally gonna butcher right now, but it's a Shakespeare quote, and it basically says that, you know, what we do as actors, as storytellers, we're holding up a mirror to society. You know, it's a way for us to like look at ourselves and be like, oh, who are we really? And what is the truth here? Even though it's being presented to me through a story or through fiction, like there's some truth to be gained and visualized in that moment. And that's, you know, that's what I hope to do. That's what I strive to do. That's what, you know, I really appreciate about good journalism. I think it's very close to the same thing, you know, the idea of holding up this mirror and asking ourselves, like, who are we? You know.
And making sure that the record is set straight. I mean, in Hamilton, there's one of the crazy things to me about that story, and reflecting on politics today, right, is that everyone today sort of bemoans how, you know, how nasty and ad hominem and based on rumor and allegation politics is. And Hamilton tells the story about how Alexander Hamilton's own rivals among those early American politicians were slinging mud and digging dirt and doing everything they could to exploit everything about his life to destroy him. And I think that, you know, good history and good history told through good art, you know, can help set the record straight for people whose reputations are still damaged from propaganda and disinformation. I mean, a lot of the activists in the women's suffrage movement and the civil rights movement, they were the targets of so much slander and, you know, official propaganda discrediting them, that the work of clearing their names and setting the record straight about what they did and what they accomplished is really important.
Oh yeah, totally. I don't know if we can take a pause in our game. I wanted to ask you, and since we're sort of on the topic of media and journalism, I know that you are the CEO of a company, of a investigative journalism company, and you're currently doing that at the same time as running in this campaign. Well, can you explain a little bit to me, like what you do in that job, and what that looks like for you right now, and sort of like what drew you to that? I'm just so fascinated by that line of work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I took over this company in 2013. It was founded in 1991 by my colleague Ron McCullough, who used to work for the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, as a reporter. In fact, he famously reported the fall of the Berlin Wall on the evening news for the British public at the end of the Cold War. So he had this amazing career in journalism. He founded this company in the early 90s because he wanted to go out on his own. And for 2 decades, he and his team, my colleague Soria Samora, and an amazing cast of producers and journalists, told some of the most difficult stories from war zones and humanitarian crises all over the planet. You know, the civil war in the Balkans, famine in the Horn of Africa. Sorius, my colleague, someone for whom I have such immense respect, Sorius Samora, told the story of his own country, Sierra Leone's civil war, in a documentary that ran on CNN called Cry Freetown, that actually caused the international intervention that stopped that conflict. And I have always been interested in journalism for many of the same reasons that I'm interested in politics. Because, first of all, to your point, it holds a mirror up to society. It sets the record straight. It holds people accountable when they abuse power and when they abuse human rights. And it also shapes the decisions we make as societies. And in order for democracy to work, we have to have informed publics. We have to have informed electorates. And so the work of getting the truth out there is something that I think is really vital. I've been running the business since 2013, and what we mostly do are anti-corruption investigations, investigations of organized crime, and investigations of war crimes. And we produce news reports and 30 and 45-minute video journalism that goes out on international television broadcasters all over the world. So in dozens of countries and so many different languages. And I really love doing this work for all those reasons. There are so many people who believe they can get away with terrible things, whether it's human trafficking, murder for hire, bribery, corruption, crooked judges, crooked police, war criminals, and they believe that they have impunity. And what so many journalists around the world do is ensure that they're held accountable. And the credit really goes to my extraordinary colleagues, Anas Arameo Anas in Ghana, and Sorius, and these journalists who put their lives on the line and go undercover to document criminality and corruption. And then we take that evidence and we broadcast it to the public and hold people accountable. And that's work that I really believe in. It's right now we're having to adapt because so much of that involves sending crews internationally and world travel is shut down, but we really pride ourselves on working with local reporters. And so those relationships that we've built with local journalists all over the world are allowing us to continue to develop and work on investigations and stories right now. But this is a tough time for journalists. It's a tough time for press freedom. When everyone is distracted by this pandemic, a lot of governments are cracking down on the press. And to be real about it, our own government's approach to the media and the press right now is emboldening a lot of that. Because, the United States has got a checkered history when it comes to the defense of human rights, but freedom of the press and protection of journalists has always at least been on the agenda. It's always been something that this country has at least tried to stand for. And right now, it's not on the agenda.
Yeah. How do you think we come back? Like, how do you think we negotiate as citizens, where to find sources of information and formulating opinions based on that, you know, like where's their hope in this situation where we're sort of like confused and thinking that maybe we're being duped by media and thinking it's somehow the enemy, and at the same time, like, you know, in order to find out anything that's going on in the world, like the first place I go is Twitter. I definitely go digging other places, but you know, like, what do you say to that? Like, what is like a solution in this confusion, do you feel?
Well, I mean, social media has made it easier for people to spread propaganda and misinformation, and harder to discern what's journalism and what's propaganda. And especially because we all, and you know, a lot of people talk about this, but we all tend to tune in to sources and accounts that validate our own pre-existing worldview. That's how we get sucked into these echo chambers where we're not exposed to contrary ideas, and where what we're getting is often meant to inflame and anger us as opposed to inform us. And the answer is public interest journalism. I mean, we cannot just rely upon corporate media whose sole objective is the bottom line. My business does a lot of work for the BBC, which is, you know, the public broadcaster. It's like PBS, but in the UK. And the BBC is not flawless as an institution, and it's got its own biases and it's got its own problems, but it has really, really rigorous editorial standards, and it has earned the trust of the public. America should have the most robust, most trusted, most hard-hitting, most investigative, most honest outlets for journalism in the world. And the truth is we don't. And we've cut funding for public media, and we've deregulated media in a way where there's not as much accountability to presenting the full picture. And that's one of the hard things about this, and the sort of the truth that's hard to grapple with is that the media has a role to play in making itself less easy to caricature and attack by holding itself to the highest possible standards. And so you don't play into the hands of politicians who benefit from dismissing all journalism by cherry picking this or that wrong reporting, or, you know, so I really think that it's true that we have a crisis in American journalism. And I hope that as we rebuild from what's being destroyed right now, one of the lessons that we learn is that we need to seriously invest in that, and we need to protect its objectivity, and we need to have strong public media that hold themselves to standards of truth above all else.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You got me going on one that I think about a lot, so forgive.
No, I'm fascinated. I'm also fascinated to know, you know, in your line of work and what you're doing with this company, how is that, or what about it is inspiring you in your run for public office? And what do you feel like, you know, what tools do you feel like from that you're sort of bringing with you, and has any of your work in that inspired you to run? Like, I kind of just want to know, like, you know, why you wanted to run in the first place back in 2017, and you know, your story there. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to someone about this a couple of days ago, that, and maybe there's some overlap here with your personal story, but my mother is an immigrant who came to the United States when she was 23. And she came to this country because she believed in it. She believed in the ideal of America that we're trying to realize, and that pulls so many immigrants to our shores. And she became a citizen, and she became an entrepreneur, and she became an activist in the feminist movement in the 70s and 80s, and marched for the ERA. And of course, our union was far from perfect before Donald Trump was elected. And the fact that he won office demonstrates how flawed our institutions, how little public faith in government and politics there is, how much work there remains to be done. And these times are proof of that. And I think proof of the need for new leadership. But it also really broke my mother's heart when he was elected, because he represented such a rejection of the ideal of America that had drawn her here in the first place, and that had drawn her into community activism and civic engagement, and that emotional reaction that so many people shared in 2016 was what drew me back into politics. And I say back into politics because I got my first taste of government and public service when I was very, very young, working briefly for Congressman John Lewis, who represents Atlanta in the US House of Representatives. And then I worked in Washington for 5 years, member of Congress from Georgia, and felt like I did a lot of good and had a great experience, but was so disillusioned by how broken it was that I left and went into journalism, which to me felt so much more pure. And I hadn't planned to get back into politics until Trump won that race. And then I thought, this is a crisis for our country. We desperately need new leadership. I didn't know exactly how I was going to get re-engaged. And then Trump appointed my hometown congressman to his cabinet, and that triggered the special election in 2017. And I ran, and no one thought I had a chance, and it became this huge race. And that's how I met you, and I lost. I lost by just a few points, but we made so much progress, and we brought so many people in and inspired a lot of people. And this is not a time to disengage or pull back. So that's why I'm back now.
The work continues.
It does. It must.
It must. Incredible.
So we have one more round of Phillipa and Jon share facts about American history on Zoom, and I'll keep it short because I know that folks have dinner reservations, but with for the fourth week in a row in the kitchen. But yeah. I do want to share a story from Massachusetts in the mid 19th century. And this is the story of the Lowell Mill Girls. And this is the first women's union in American history. And there were textile mills all across the Northeast and the Massachusetts that employed mostly women, a lot of them very young, like beginning to work at 13, 14, 15 years old in very, very harsh, brutal conditions. And in Lowell, Mass, there was a revolt against the exploitation of this labor because the conditions were so appalling. We're talking spinning, this is really dangerous stuff. People losing limbs and obviously the conditions being horrible and at risk of so many injuries and death from work for no real money. And, living on site in terrible conditions, just really appalling stuff. And out of that sprung a group of women who unionized their mill. And that is the first example of a women's labor union in American history. And they struck in 1834 and 1836, and they had bitter disputes with the owners of these mills, and things even got violent from time to time. They really put their lives on the lines and their families' lives on the lines. And in the long run, both through lobbying the legislature, through political activity, and by asserting their power as workers. They reduced the workdays, they negotiated for higher pay, and they inspired people across the country who didn't think labor organizing was possible at all, let alone for women working in textile mills. And I thought that was a really powerful story from history that I wanted to share with you.
I love that story. I love that story because in the context of like the sort of Seneca Falls, like, you know, Civil War era, it's way before, it's like 10 years before, 10, 15 years before Seneca Falls. And so like the women's rights movement had been happening for many years before that. And, you know, it came to a point where like it was a no-brainer that if we are able to collectively agree that we have human rights, that shouldn't we also have the right to participate in our elections, like as people? I'm just so like, and how old were they? And like 15?
Anywhere from 15, yeah, 15 and up. I mean, a lot of these were teenagers.
Yeah.
Who were then looking ahead at their lives and just seeing decades working in these mills, living on site 14 to 18 hours a day. But they did something about it.
That's right. That's right. I love that. Good one, Jon.
Good. Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I hope that sometime we can play Phillipa and Jon share facts from American history again. It really means a lot that you made some time, and thank you for your support and your friendship. And all of us in Georgia have huge love for everybody in New York, and you know, everyone
Likewise.
who tuned in.
We're thinking about you guys.
Appreciate that, and love to everyone out there online. I hope this was a fun way to spend some time. Everyone stay healthy. Thank you to all of the folks involved in the health response. Thank you to all of the essential workers. We'll get through this together, and there's going to be a lot of work to do rebuilding. So let's do it together.
Let's do it. Thank you, Jon.
Okay, until next time.
Till next time, be well.
You too. Bye.